We're out here on the coast and came across this spot on a place called Granite Trail, which is kind of an interesting place to stop and do a painting. And so I think we'll start here. So I'm first putting a few marks on my canvas to make some decisions on where I think the placement will be. But then you can see in this, I start with dark. You work from thin to thick, lean to fat, dark to light. Those are all things on how you lay down your oil paint, which is thin to thick or lean to fat is you're laying it in more washes at the beginning. The white of the canvas will help. It's hard to make the distinction and judge the values, but it does help with when you're first laying in the white canvas. It makes it difficult to judge your values, but if you can put your colors in fairly quickly, you can use that white of the canvas to be bouncing through your transparent colors and your shadows, which really help in giving them life. I'm laying down quickly. You might see the mark I put on the top of the distant cliff. The reason I put that mark was to notice where the horizon came across that, which was a mental note to say that that's going to be a bad tangent, that I do not want the top of that cliff and that beach to intersect. So that was just a mark as a reminder of, hey, when you get up there, remember you're going to have to move that either up or down. So we're working big to small, bigger shapes first, just laying them in, just looking for those color relationships. Here I'm noticing the reflection of the warm cliffs going into the ocean. As I see that, I want to make sure that I'm painting the ocean first. You could put all the white water, but I'm going to paint all the reflections first. And then a really interesting, and maybe one of the main reasons I stopped here, is the cliffs are I think have a nice range of temperature from the bottom to the top, and I like that transition. So we're going to start building that in. And as you see, big, bold shapes, working big to small, and not worried about the detail, just trying to get in the large shapes as quick as I can. This demo in the end will be an hour long. The canvas is a 12/16 size. So I'm going to be working fairly quickly. One thing you want to do first, no matter, 8x10, 12/16, 9x12, 16/20, I try to cover my canvas in the first 30 minutes or so. A smaller canvas will be quicker. Now you might notice the dark value I just put in behind those cliffs. And you do want to take note, that's not the sky. Those cliffs really shine, and the glow to them comes because those mountains, or I should say hills, behind them. So you want to make sure you get that. That helps them pop forward. Also in the water, you can see I'm seeing the variation of, the oxygen put into the water with the waves is creating the more turquoise around the cliffs. I want to make sure I'm taking note of that. So this is really a back and forth process in here. I'm carving in, I put in my initial shadow shape, and now then I put my light, and now I'm putting in, some dark accents and kind of carving and forming these rocks. One thing that's good in seeing a demo is it's not all one finished product. Is you lay in, and there's different layers. You're putting it in to a certain amount of finish. And once you develop that, then you're putting the next level of finish, and then the next level, and this carving of, I'm not using an eraser, I'm using my paintbrush to put in the shape to carve out the previous shape into the right proportions and design. And this can be an enjoyable process as you're doing it. Once you start getting the color relationships in, then this pushing and pulling, you're just studying and learning more and more about how these rocks work, or a tree, or ground, or water. As I gave my other example when I did the small 5x7 studies, or 4x6, whatever size those smaller ones were on location, that those help inform this type of painting. Once you can put the relationships down fairly quickly, then you're going to be able to paint larger, and then when you're painting a little bit larger, you're just able to show a little more form. And that's why I feel like 100 starts or 100 quick studies of smaller paintings is so important in the improvement of our observation skills. rather than spending all our time on maybe one large finish. And throughout this painting, and whenever you paint, you're trying to show different materials. So I am always trying to make rocks look different than water, than trees. See there with a little bit of paper towel on the canvas. Yeah, as you see, I rarely erase. When I do, it's because I either have a dark in a light area so extreme or a light in a dark that it will contaminate the area, or I'm trying to soften up an edge. So those are really the two times. But you can see the rest of the painting, it's carving with the color next to it. So here I'm noticing that the white water is taking on the influence of the sky and going quite blue in the shadow there. So I'm going to show the difference of the white water of the ocean in shadow and in light. So on this one, I am painting this in direct sunlight, which is, I think, really good for the sake of the demo, because you can see my colors the most clearly and it's bright. You're able to see the most detail. However, bringing a painting like this that looks correct in the sunlight back in my studio, of course, is going to really darken. And this was the best to show a demo, but certainly not the best for the end product when it's brought into my studio or brought into a gallery, etc. At this point, we're working just more minute shapes, smaller and smaller, refining, trying to get those color relationships so I can use those back in my studio. That when I get back in my studio, I can then say, wow, okay, I have a lot of information here. By taking some photo reference and working from this, because the photo's never going to capture the color, but this will capture my interpretation of the scene, and a photo will just be a great reminder of maybe certain shapes that I would like to refine a little more. Never going anywhere close to photorealism. That's not why I have it. It's just this reminder between a painting and a photo. It's a great jogging of my memory. Now you can certainly work just from the painting alone, but I do find it useful to reference my photo occasionally, certainly never for color. And you can see, like I mentioned earlier, about where I dropped that horizon, and if I see cliffs receding in the distance and they are lining up with a tangent, then I know that's not going to work, and it's going to be hard to read. So I certainly designed that part to move it, and that's a very easy move. When you're on location, it's not even a thought. You just move it up or down and keep going. Starting to carve out these shapes. Now, like you said, this is just under an hour, so I'm going really working the light side and keeping the dark side, the shadow side of this painting, keeping those pretty close in temperature. If I wanted to refine this more, then I'd be working that out more, putting a few more notes of temperature variation in the shadows. Here I'm carving in and out the shape of that rock. As you can see at the beginning, I put just the overall kind of idea, and then I'll reduce and reduce. But one thing you want to be careful of who is going to be more important, this rock or the distant cliff. And so you have to paint accordingly so you don't give too much brushwork information in the wrong place. So here I'm putting in that light water. The real problem with painting, if I like one stroke of something or a color or a value, then I'll put 10,000 of it. So more is not better. You find a stroke and you like the shape or whatever, don't put 20 of them, just put enough. This is the crashing, the wave that's coming into the closest foreground. You can play all day in that water, the slight, depending on which plane. Each ripple in the ocean is a different plane, of course, facing a different direction, so they will all take on just a slightly different temperature or a different value. One nice thing about being outside is usually the light will change enough that it forces you to finish. Sometimes in your studio you can just work endlessly and really beat a painting up, where when you're working outside is this limit. You move on, you say, this is as good as I am today. I'll do better tomorrow. I'm pleased with how this one's coming out. So we'll back up from here, take a look at what it looks like after, like I said, just under an hour. And as you get to see me here painting and finishing this one up, you get an idea of size and place, and we will then move into a shot of the painting by itself, and you can see what I was able to accomplish in this time period.